Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Hobby Cheating Q&A Live. Why, what is this? Well, this is something where we sit here for about an hour, and we're going to go ahead and answer all of your hobby-related questions. The idea is you put them in the chat over on, let's see, toward the dog. That side. There you go. And I've got my co-host here with me. She's very excited, as you can see. And she's going to be helping me today extensively, I'm sure. She's an expert in the hobby. At least you'd think so. She sat here for most hours with me, so, there you go. So we're going to be talking about the hobby. Any questions you've got, throw them up there, and I'll do my best to answer them. So just drop them in there. I've got my new kitty cat up in the corner. I'm going to post all the pictures of him up later today. Working on some other stuff here on my desk. I'm working on 10 of these annoying little bikers for my pistoliers, so all my battle line will be done. Time to take your medicine. We call this the battle line medicine, so we got to get that done. All right, so anyway, let's start answering some questions as some people already dropped in. And hello, everybody. Everybody coming in from around the world. I'm so happy to see everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. There's a lot of course, rough times going on right now, but we still have our hobby. We still have hopefully our things that matter, our friends and our family and our hobby and all of those things. So we can celebrate that. And hey, look, single person streaming. This is self quarantine-a-thon right here. I'm ready to go. This age does not go away. So, that's great. Okay, so anyways, let's answer some questions. All right, so the first question, let me scroll back here, sorry. How would you paint the skin and face of a tired man, somebody very, very tired, like tired all the way through? Yeah, so the answer is you want to up the sort of pinks in the skin a lot. That sort of has a feeling to it. You want to up a little bit of the gray tone in the skin in your sort of mid to highlights. Because gray just has a way of feeling kind of old and tired. That's the emotion it communicates. And then finally, you want to make sure that you have like deep lines and dark circles around the eyes, things like that. You still don't want to go all the way around the eye, but you want it to be reaching out more from underneath the eye here. Okay. Yeah, so basically that would be my answer. It's, somebody who's really tired. I mean, it has a lot to do with the eyes as well. You can push more red, more bloodshot into the eyes. Depends on the scale of the miniature and sort of what you're able to achieve. If it was a larger bust, you could do more than if it was say a 28 mil miniature. It's going to be really hard to capture that kind of emotion. Okay, let's see. Zen for one said, hello all from sunny Florida. Yeah, it's snowing here today in Ohio, so how about that? Okay. Zektari, have you tried the third generation of AK Interactive acrylics? No, I have not. I mean, they're brand new. They aren't really even available in the States yet in any wide degree. I was talking to somebody from the U.S. rep of AK Interactive and talking about what I could do to get some of those to do a review. So at some point, it's certainly something I want to try. It's on my list. I mean, I just got my Chimera colors and have been playing with them for the past couple weeks. And spoiler, I do love them. There'll be a full review for them coming next week. Oh, poor Emily, who's in the healthcare industry and will have no rest for the wicked during this. So good luck, Emily. Stay safe and safe travels. Okay, let's see. Bartek, hey Vince, you mentioned in your oil washes video that you like to use them for flesh as well. Can you give some tips on that? Yeah, sure. I mean, if you're looking to get high highlights into skin, nearer to white reflections and stuff like that, it's great. Doesn't go chalky, really easy to smooth out. Love them for low lights and filters. You can make oil washes down so the white isn't in a wash. It's just you put a little tiny dot of white paint on there, and then you just smooth it out with a dry brush. I love it for filters and things because it does make filters really well. So you can take sepia tones and stuff like that and apply a very gentle wash of it and then wipe it away or smooth it out, again, with a dry brush or a t-shirt or something like that, or a piece of foam. There's lots of different options. Or my personal favorite, these little makeup brush wedges that you can get a whole lot of for very, very cheap. So that kind of thing. One thing I'll say is if you want to see it in action, go over to James Wapple's channel. We recently did an interview with him, and he uses oils quite a lot, so would recommend that. So check that out. Let's see. Somebody asked Chimera Colors, what are your thoughts? There'll be a full review coming the end of next week, and my thoughts are I love them, but they are a very limited set of colors, so you have to be either down for mixing or you're going to be using other colors for other things. That would be my short answer. Zektari, do you thin ultramatte varnish from AK in your airbrush, and if so, with what ratio? Yes, absolutely. I absolutely thin everything all the time. So let me just get this out there. I thin everything. Full stop. If your follow-up question is, but do you thin this? I thin everything. Period. End of discussion. Okay, so let's get that out there. All right, now, ratios. Sure, generally I keep a couple drops of thinner in there. My thinner mix is a 80-20 mix of thinner and flow improver. So if I'm doing like an average size figure, let's say, I'd put, 2 or 3 drops of thinner in there to, I don't know, 5 or 6 drops of varnish, I guess. Something like that. So a little less than 1 to 2, I guess, would be the thinner to varnish ratio. Maybe apply the varnish in a couple thin coats, something like that. Well, thank you very much, Bass. I appreciate that. I'm always here and happy to help. Crazy Horse question, when will you start a Seraphon army and why is it right now? I probably will do something Seraphon related. So I have a bunch of old Seraphon models, like from back in 4th and 5th edition, so metal stegodons and stuff. I was thinking what a fun army to do another paint an army in 24 hours project with. It'd just be fun to have another army to put on the table, and I could do the whole thing in a day. Because they are the easiest army, one of the easiest armies to paint. And you can do lots of colorful, creative things with them. So, and I might use some different techniques. Like I'd love to use some oils on them. I think they'd take that really well. They'd be great for doing patterns and just stuff like that. But they're so uni texture. Like they're often almost all skin, with only slight bits of a weapon or a small item or something they're carrying, or a tiny piece of armor. Like lots of lizards are basically naked, so it makes it a lot easier. And so I was thinking that may be a fun project. I want to get this stuff I'm currently working on for my Tempest Eye army done, because this is going to be a big boost to that army and will get me up to a really nice place. And then I need to think about sort of what other units I want to do for that army. And so I'll probably do it then. Might order 1 or 2 of the new kits just to kind of supplement, because it'd be fun to have just like a big Carnosaur model, something like that. But that's probably not for a month or 2, just to really level set on that, so we're all clear. I don't know when it will be, at some point. Let's see. Olaf, how do you choose where to put a highlight on a sphere, as it depends on the angle from which you look at it? Well, it's whatever angle you've decided for your light. So if you've lit from above, then that's where you light the sphere. Like, a sphere itself isn't lit differently. No, Siri, shut up. A sphere itself isn't lit differently depending on the angle you look at it. It's lit differently depending on the angle of the light. And spheres are one of the simpler shapes to highlight because they have a very standardized highlight structure going from, like, again, if we use just sort of the 1 through 5 and we assume that this is the sphere, then it's, kind of 1, let me do it on this side of my hand so you can see it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, right, on the reflected light. So, bouncing off of, the ground or another nearby surface. So effectively, like, as always, I like to set the angle of my light. Say, is it coming? And my general thing, I almost always highlight from, like, 1:30 p.m., basically. So slightly off-center zenithal. And I find that to be just sort of the most stable area and easy to work from, and then I just highlight the spheres accordingly. One of the more common spheres you'll tend to see are kneecaps. It's about kneecap armor specifically. So if you think of a Space Marine or something like that, so just set your highlight point at wherever you've said the light is coming from. And that's a decision you make on all the shapes on your miniature. All right. Okay. Let's see. Oh, some support for the 3rd gen acrylics from AK. Cool. Well, happy to. I look forward to trying them out. Judgmental Hamster. Is there a chart that shows similar colors from different brands? I mean, there's an old chart if you search for like just paint range compatibility DACA chart. You'll see an old chart that gets tossed around a lot from DACA. Yeah, which is what Andrew Fairbanks mentioned. But I will mention that that chart is also wildly out of date and hasn't kept pace with the industry on all the new sort of colors that have come out. The answer is don't worry about it too much. Unless you're looking to go shopping, which I understand that can be tricky, but I mean, the answer is in most cases, it doesn't matter. Like, as long as it's pretty close. It's a red brown. Okay, so any red brown will basically work. But yes, you can check the DACA one if you want to see something. That has sort of the main lines as they stood several years ago. It's still useful. And if you're using common colors or common brands, it will still help. Derek. Hey, Vince, do you know of any mini artists with a similar painting style to you with a Patreon? Well, as in zenithal and lots of glazing. I mean, I don't know that I always do that necessarily anymore. I'm not sure that's even my painting style anymore, to be completely honest with you, Derek. I oftentimes will, I don't know what my style is or how I would do it. Now, if your question is, do I know anybody who's doing the zenithal and lots of glazing thing? Sure that, like, there's plenty of people for whom James Wapple has a shaded base coat technique, which he relies on pretty thin, transparent layers built up in lots of time. So that's similar-ish to what you're talking about. So I would honestly check him out. That's probably the closest because he builds his colors like that. My technique now is often a lot more like, sure, I might glaze a set of color. Depends on the surface. Depends on what's going on, how much texture there is. I mix airbrush in a lot more. I use a lot of wet blending. Sometimes I'll go very strong with my color. I'll go very thick, and then I wet blend it out. Like, I use a very Pigden style of whatever I feel is appropriate for that moment and for that particular surface or whatever I happen to be working on. So, yeah, that's what I'd say. Konstantinos. Hey, Vince, cool to catch you at Europe time. Finishing up my 3rd Vanguard now. Could you explain what filters are? Yeah, sure. So a filter is just a really thin glaze. I mean, that's the easiest way to say it if you're talking about consistency. The point of a filter is either to intensify or slightly alter a color to enhance either saturation or realism or volume or depth of information being communicated by the color. I use filters all the time. I talk about them quite frequently in hobby cheating videos. If you watch the Crimson Armor one from today, the final alizarin crimson step that I do is basically a filter. It's being used to, in other words, it's not meant to supplant or replace or really cover in any way any of the paints underneath it. It's meant to simply express different variations of those tones through the very, very, very thin layer you've put on the top. The most common place that I end up using filters are often with faces and skin. If you watch the full video I did on the mini I did for Golden Demon of the Dark Oath Chieftain, I filter his skin at the end with a sepia tone, which is a very common thing you'll see a lot of people do in airbrushing videos, is to sort of have a sepia tone filter. I'll usually do filters for cheek coloration. So take a red or a magenta and thin it way, 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 way down. And you just run you run a little bit of that over there and then kind of fuzz the edges a little bit. So, yeah, that's a filter. Shagarag, you've got me convinced to buy an airbrush. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. How necessary would you say a spray booth and respirator are? I would say it's pretty good to have a spray booth. Just depends on where you're spraying, I guess. Like if you're If you have an unfinished basement or something that you're spraying in, I don't know that it matters too much, but I mean, you're going to get paint everywhere. That's all it is. The booth isn't about breathing. It's about, also, I'm going to assume you're talking about acrylic paints here, by the way, like non-toxic acrylic paints. If you're spraying toxic paints, enamels, or anything like that, you absolutely want a booth to capture all that and filter all that, and a respirator is absolutely essential. You do not want to be breathing fumes from those things that are out and out toxic in those kinds of cases. Please do always keep yourself safe and use a respirator and you know, things like that. But for standard acrylic paints, I mean, you know, my advice is always you should probably wear a mask. I don't wear a mask. I'll be completely honest with you. I do use a booth, and it does have a fan in it, and that has a HEPA filter in it, and I do run that. Beyond that, though, I mean, I don't. But you don't have to be like me. If you want my personal experience, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I spray quite a lot. I've never had an issue. Some people are more sensitive than others. You know yourself better than I do. And then when I say that again, I'm talking about non-toxic acrylic paints. But it's what I would recommend is, you know, do what I say, not what I do. It is always better to you know, be as safe as possible. But I'll leave that to you and your tolerance level for that. So there you go. A booth is good just because it keeps your walls clean, if nothing else. Like you could spray with no booth and just with a mask if you're concerned about safety. A booth isn't a safety issue. It's really you don't want paint all over your walls and surfaces because that's what will happen. There you go. Okay. Hey, Cujo, how you doing? Cujo said in response to the thing I said about always thinning, if your next question is, am I thinning this enough? The answer is no. I would tend to agree with him. I think people often, like when they're using their airbrush, try to get by with like the minimum amount of thinning, which doesn't really make sense to me. Like your airbrush is such a fast tool. And we always talk about like everybody has internalized now the thinning your paints is often good, right? Because it, you know, using thin controlled layers of paint help you get a smoother finish and avoid buildup and you know, the 20 benefits of using thin paint. But yeah, with the airbrush, it seems like we just, all those lessons just go right out the brain. And we just try to get it like thin enough so it sprays. That's good enough. No, like be thinner. Your airbrush can apply a whole layer of paint like that. So why not use more thin layers? Like you'll get a smoother application of it. I completely agree with Cujo. This man speaks wisdom. This MF spitting right here. So there you go. Okay. Let's see. John Gallant. When stippling, what kind of paint consistency is best? Do you typically have a little paint in the brush, or is it loaded up? Well, you don't want it to be just the tip of the brush, even when stippling. And the reason for that, the answer is generally like a layer consistency, whatever that tends to mean. Like a thin but not overtly thin controlled amount of paint. And you don't want it just in the tip. You want to actually use the largest brush you can for stippling because you're using just the tip. And because keep in mind that the tip, the paint at the tip of your brush is staying wet and liquidated by the moisture in the belly of your brush. That's why when you use a little itty bitty baby brush, it dries like that because there's no belly in it and there's no water seeping up. Like there's capillary action in your brush that's pushing liquid toward the top when you push that brush against something. The more moisture is in the belly of your brush, the more the paint at the tip will stay liquid. So the answer is, like, most of the time when I do my stippling, I use a pretty standard layer consistency, and I use a pretty standard amount of paint on, like, a size 1-ish brush with a nice tip. Yeah, that's what I'd say. So there you go. Cameron, following up on Zektari's question, can I blow varnish through my HPCS, or should I use a separate? My HPCS is what I use for varnishing all the time. That is my workhorse brush, I'll say, so I use different brushes for very fine detail work. But it doesn't really matter. Like the key is to just make sure your airbrush is nice and clean afterward. I use still, like, if you watch my how to clean your airbrush fast video, that's exactly the technique I use all the time. I will state though that when I use varnish or primer, instead of just rinsing it with water, I do also rinse it with 99% isopropyl alcohol. and make sure that that gets in there. That will generally destroy acrylic paint pretty fast. 99% isopropyl alcohol is pretty destructive to acrylic paint and will just kind of break it down. Same with varnish, by the way. It will chew up varnish. So I just use that, make sure that's nice and clean. And the other secret, by the way, like I'll give you all the, this isn't what was asked, but I'll give you all the great secret to keeping your airbrush nice and usable. You're not gonna be able to see this, but this is one of my airbrushes. This is like my Highline that I use for a lot of detail work. It's got a 0.2 needle in it. I'm sure you're not gonna be able to see that, but there is water inside of there right now. This is just, obviously it's not connected to anything. This was just sitting over in my holder. I always just leave my airbrush with a little bit of water inside of it. Your airbrush is stainless steel. It's all metal. Just regular water is not going to hurt anything. It's not going to rust anything. It's not going to injure anything. I wouldn't leave like solvents or anything in there. But, and yes, I understand that that in acrylic paint, water is the solvent. But I just leave water in the airbrush. And then when I start airbrushing, I just dump that water, blow it through, and it's clean and smooth and ready to go. Keeps anything from drying on your needle or stuff like that. Okay. All right. Skunk 12, Vince, how can I convince my wife? That I can't help you with, my friend. Gotcha. I understand your question. That is outside of the purview of the hobby-related questions I can answer. Dice Dealer, are OSL and True Metallic Metal mutually exclusive? No, absolutely not. You can certainly create reflections on True Metallic. You can integrate colors. You can lay down inks over top in the same way you would any other addition of color. No, they work very well together. You just need to be aware of what's going on there. Like okay, so let's assume, here we go. I'll pick up a metal thing. Okay, so this thing is like, there you go. That's glowing from OSL, right? OSL just means there's some kind of light source other than generic ambient environmental light. If I put a just blue filter over that light that's reflecting this, it's not like these two things are suddenly incompatible, right? I would just need to be aware that where the light is reflecting the brightest, I'm trying to turn it to an angle where you'll see it, like where the light is reflecting the brightest here, that's still going to be near white light, right? So you can't just like run blue ink over it and call it a day. In general, your highest highlight, again, just using the simple terminology so we can talk about this. 1 being your highest highlight, 5 being your deepest shadow. Yes, you probably have more than 5 variations, but we'll keep it simple. Your 1 should be like a vaguely infused element of that color. Like you take your brightest silver or chrome or Molotow chrome or whatever you happen to be using, and you just have a little bit of that teeny bit of that blue in there so it gets that tint. And then beyond that is where it's actually in the sort of 2-3 range is where it's actually showing the reflection. So there you go. All right. Ariel, hi Vince. Fernando Ruiz will be holding a masterclass near where I live when he can leave Spain again. Would you recommend going? Yeah, he's a great painter. I mean, I always recommend in-person learning from anybody. If you can, obviously this is not a great time for it in the world right now, but that in general, there's no reason we can't do one-on-ones and stuff like that, or even going to classes as time goes on. And the answer is yes. I mean, I've found anytime I've sat down with somebody who I consider to be a good painter to be valuable, period. There is no substitute for in-person learning. If you look at like the learning chart of like what generally makes you learn best, in-person education and then repeating that practice are the sort of foundational pyramid that have the largest amount of retention. So there you go. Okay. Oh, nice. People are mentioning the Paint Rack app. Oh, that's a good idea. I had forgot about that one. Yeah, good call. Brooks, any updates on an advanced eye tutorial? Well, I did one for chibi eyes, and honestly, that's pretty good. Like, a lot of the rules for chibi eyes are just doing really ultra crazy bright eyes. They're cartoon colored, but they still aim for a level of sort of realism in there. But yeah, I don't know. If the opportunity comes, I will certainly add it in there. Michael Anderson, what's the best way to highlight black? I am particularly interested in drow flesh. Yeah, I mean, drow flesh is much more gray. It's a very different situation. Like, drow flesh is still flesh. And in that case, I would use probably like a Caucasian flesh tone to build up my highlights, because people just tend to recognize that. Look at lots of artwork of Drow. Obviously, we can't go to the real world, but that would be there. Now, the best way to highlight black, there are a million ways to highlight black. I have multiple different videos on highlighting black, which I would recommend, I would advise you to go check out if you're just talking about black in general, because it's highly, highly, highly dependent on the surface. The difference between how I would highlight black wool, for example, an extremely sort of matte cloth surface, and a glossy black car are night and day different, right? In general, the answer is you want to infuse some kind of hue in there. You want black and white are your most boring colors. They don't do anything. They're visually uninteresting, and they have very little punch. So you infuse hue in them to make them interesting. So with, like, for example, drow skin, I would look at something like using a Caucasian flesh tone as my highlight, and I would probably bridge the gap through the midtones with purple, like a deeper purple, because then you're adding some kind of hue that's visually interesting and compelling. I have a video coming out talking about using yellow regularly in your purple. So, you know, in your low tones. So that kind of stuff. Jarrett, hey Vince, did you film any more of the painting of the Karkadrak? I did not. I didn't know. This is the only video I have for him. I wasn't sure that there was really anything else that I had to say about him that I haven't covered before. If there was something you saw about him that you feel I haven't covered or you'd like to see covered, I mean, I have another one of that guy, so I might paint a second one of him at some point. So, I'm happy to you know, think about future videos. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Alex mentioned Travarian style is very glaze heavy. That's a great call. Thank you. Yes, Travarian would be a wonderful example of somebody who used a lot of glazes. A+. Thank you, Alex. Okay. Vince, 2 cents for your opinion of Doctor Who's last series. You mean the latest one, I assume? I didn't watch it, so that should tell you what I think about it. I mean, I just fell off. I like Doctor Who a lot. You all can't see it, but this whole wall, like, I think I've only shown it in, like, the walkthrough of my studio or office or whatever you want to call this place I sit, this room. My whole wall is a mural of the 10th Doctor's TARDIS. So it looks like when you look at that wall, it looks like you're looking down into the TARDIS. It's like an 11-foot tall mural that runs the whole width of my wall. And I love the Doctor. I have the 10th Doctor's coat. I wear it all the time. It's one of my favorite jackets. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It wasn't because I think it's bad. It's just because I kind of fell away from the show. There's too much good stuff to watch. My wife watched it. She seems to like it. So there you go. Okay. Hi, Vince. Any advice on getting smooth blends? Sure. I have a whole video on it called Achieving Smooth Blends. And I go watch that is the short answer to the question. But the answer, the long answer to the question, I guess. I mean, that being said, blending, I teach a whole hour and a half and longer class on this. Blending is really a matter of attacking things in different styles. All blending techniques are because we use acrylic paint, which is meant to dry fast and to be durable. It's bad for blending. Like, the base tool we use is bad at the thing we're trying to do. If we used oil paints, there'd be no classes on blending. Wouldn't even be a concern, because oil paints stay wet forever. So there's lots of different techniques you can get to achieve smooth blends. You can use retardant. You can use wet blending, where you're using very thick paints and smoothing them on the miniature. You can use lots of glazing. You can use your airbrush in later steps. There's literally an infinite number of ways to achieve it, right? The key is all just time. Some of those methods are faster than others. Some achieve better results than others. Depends on what you're aiming at as far as quality level and the amount of time you have to dedicate. Because, and the source of all of that is that we're using the wrong tool for the job. Acrylic paints are ultimately not meant to blend. They're meant to dry fast and be durable. So there you go. Narcoleptic. Alizarin Crimson is my new favorite red, and mixing it with Viridian makes an awesome black cherry. Can't get it to work with my acrylics, but in oils it's awesome. Yeah, I mean, alizarin crimson, there's a reason Bob Ross was always sneaking that into every painting because it is a fantastic color. My, my golden acrylic alizarin crimson gets a lot of use. I like it quite a bit, as you can tell from this extra little dangle of paint hanging off it that I just now noticed. Okay. Let's see. Joseph. Oh, good. Awesome. It said he's enjoying that crimson. Hello, everybody. Got some people joining the chat. Hey, Vince, no question. Just thanks for your freehand detail vid. Awesome, man. That's right. You have the power. That is exactly correct. You are absolutely right. You've got the touch. You've got the power. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Josh Kelly, I've been having issues with very thin airbrushed paint peeling up, particularly scale 75. Sure, any thin paint, when you break it down far enough, could have that happen. It can when you say peeling, I assume you mean like you put another layer over it, and when you wet the paint, it becomes workable again. The answer is just varnish more. Put on your very, very extreme thin layers and then varnish the mini and then go back and keep painting. So I have a video coming out in a couple weeks all about different uses for varnish. But this is what I always talk about with creating save points. Like, I varnish minis many times in the course of painting them, not just at the end. Put on your thin paints with your airbrush, let it dry completely, and then varnish it. Let that dry, and then go nuts. You'll be fine. You won't peel up any paint. Daniel Rodriguez. Hey, Vince, could you please explain or show how to set the light on faces to make the face look softer, sweeter? When I airbrush a model, the light looks good and the face is soft. How to set the light on faces to make the face look softer or sweeter? Well, in general, if you're trying to make a face look soft, the answer is you don't want deep, dark contrast in crease lines. So think of like your lines here, 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 right? Here, and here. In general, you want those to be very smooth, soft transitions. So let me see. There's some more other questions. When I need to push the shadows and highlights, I end with a harsh, severe face. Okay. So yeah, I mean, the answer is just, it's a lot of work. Like, so here's a simple rule. Let's say you're painting a figure and you're going to spend X amount of time. If you want the face to look really nice, 40% of that time should be spent on the face. And faces are lots of back and forth, very careful blending and glazing and stuff like that, because they go through a lot of transitions. Faces have a lot of different colors on them. They're an area of extreme high detail in a very small amount of space. So you can push to high highlights. They just need to softly transition away, right? So it's lots of glazes of colors to get it really smooth and well aligned. And, in general, you want to follow like the T rule, right? Depending on the face. So here and here, depending on how bald you are, there's a capital T mixed with a lowercase t, or how pronounced the eyebrows are. But that's where you want your extreme highlights to be. And it will get softer if, like, take male faces, for example. Yellow, red, blue, okay, is what people talk about as being it. So this should be yellow infused. This area should be red infused around your cheeks, your nose, your eyes. And this area should be blue infused because you've got stubble like I have right now. Because my wife is gone and, whatever. I'm just sitting around painting all day. I'm not going to go shave. That takes time. It takes time that could be painting. And so the answer is to transition through that stuff really softly. You can't have extreme color changes on the face where there's harsh lines. That's what will really hurt you more than anything. So I hope that helps. Okay. I am going to do some more videos on faces coming up. It's something I want to talk more about. So you'll see some more face videos in coming months. Anthony, hi Vince from Oz. Hello. I tell the wizard I said hello. It'd be interesting for you to do some composition analysis explanation videos, e.g., some that look at the same model by different artists who have used different approaches to composition. Oh, that's a cool idea. Yeah, I've done a couple composition videos, but that's a really neat idea. Okay. I'll see what I can do. I'll take that down. That's a great idea. All right. I like that. I'm going to put that in my notes right now. Let me bring that up. Let me bring up my notes for future video stuff file that I keep. Composition comparison video. Okay, got it. Saved. Great suggestion. Okay, I find that I'm thinning the paint properly, but sometimes I take too long before dipping again. I'm always trying to extend the paint on the brush to the limit. Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's a thing. You've got to, it takes a couple seconds to go back to the palette to wet your brush to do whatever you need. You know, do that. Don't let the paint dry on the brush. It's a good way to ruin your brush and waste money, number one. It's a good way to get a bad chalky result, number two. So, yeah, I mean, that's just breaking a bad habit. You know, it's what happens. Okay. Let's see. Brian Trailer. Hi, Vince. I'm new and have been painting oops, sorry, I lost it. I'm new and I've been painting a starter box using contrast paints. There are a ton of areas that I can't get my brush into, but it's all primed and white, so it sticks out. Can that be fixed? Sure. It's one of the reasons I prefer zenithal priming over that, and why sometimes I do sub-assemblies. So I would think about both of those things. You don't have to use those primers with contrast paints. They will work fine with any kind of primer, especially if it comes out of an airbrush and is very smooth. I would argue they probably work better off an airbrush primer because it is so much smoother. The answer is you get as long a bristled brush as you can. I don't know what you mean by can't get your brush in there, but the answer is identify those areas first and shove black paint in there, or not black, or, you know, some very dark colored paint in there. And just kind of push it in there. So if you ever watched Marika Reimer paint, who she's not painting as much anymore because I think she's a neuroscientist and is doing that work, but she's one of my favorite artists of all time. And when she started figures, one of the first things she would do is create her deepest shadows by just shoving dark paint into deep creases, like off of a white prime, right? So she would just take a big brush and start like, just literally like pushing a bunch of dark paint in there. And then she would just paint over top of it, right? As it went on and the shadows were set. So, I mean, that's probably what I would recommend to you. In the future, if you notice spaces like that, just shove some very dark paint in there before you do the contrast over the rest of the thing. And that will probably help you. You don't have to actually use black. Just use some dark shadowish color to sort of get rid of the white. Emily asked, do you leave water in your airbrush with the needle in, or do you take the needle out? I leave the needle in and just put airbrush in. Never had a problem. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Enza. Hey, Vince, any way to thicken pre-thinned paint like Vallejo Game Color Air? My metallic paint keeps slipping from the surface I'm painting on. It's not binding. I think it's called beading. So the answer is take that paint, get rid of it, get rid of that metal paint, throw that in the garbage, and go get yourself some Vallejo Metal Color, which is this paint right here, okay? And then this is the only metal paint you ever use again. This is extremely thin, and it won't matter. It will cover like a dream in one coat over any color. It will suddenly become steel. It will glaze, it will blend, it will wet blend, it will do everything, and it will shine brighter than any other metal you've ever had. There you go. It's completely airbrush ready, and it will not bead. It will just perfectly apply a smooth, beautiful coat of wonderfully lustrous, perfect metal. That's your answer. The only other answer I would have is no, not really. But you know, in general, you can wick off. There's no way to thicken it, but there's a way to dry it, which is make sure you're always wicking your paint. You should always be wicking. ABW, always be wicking. Wicking means this. When you get your, this is my paper towel I keep in front of me. Notice, look at my paper towels. See all this? This is just wicking paint, right? Every time you put your brush in paint, you should be touching it to the paper towel first. And that will drain away the excess liquid. So, there you go. It can't be a hobby cheating Q&A if I don't go on at least one rant about Vallejo Metal Color. Cameron. Okay, great. Awesome. Good. Excellent. Joe Orthober. Oh, there you go. All right. Yes, we're just talking about Joe's wood. Okay, that's fair. Orthober Studios does make some excellent plinths and has some beautiful wood. So there you go. If you're looking for great plinths, I highly recommend you look up Orthober Studio on Facebook, and you can order some great stuff from him. Let's see. Getting back into the hobby after 14-ish years away, suggestions on glue to use. I mean, sure, I can tell you what I use. So I use 3-ish, 4-ish different types of glue. If it's plastic, I will generally use Revel contact glue as my plastic glue. I love Revel. This is my favorite stuff. I get it from like Europe or whatever where it is. And then I will smooth over it with some Tamiya Extra Thin. So that's my plastic glue, assuming I can use that. Otherwise, super glue, I use sort of these two. I use the Zap-A-Gap for cheaper things and stuff like terrain and gluing cork to a base or something like that. And I use the Loctite gel for resin or metal or things like that. This is really the best stuff around. It's great. It can still react. It'll still react to accelerant, but it forms an unbelievably strong bond. And it's gel, so it's easy to put some on there, and then you can still move the mini around and get it set in place, then push it together, and you're good to go. Okay. Let's see. So Judgmental Hamster just started out. Small collection of paints. I've heard Vallejo washes aren't that good. So is there a brand I should use? Should I just go with Citadel? And yeah, the answer is if you're just starting out and you're using a sort of traditional GW method, which is perfectly fine on the learning, on the initial learning, there's absolutely nothing wrong with painting like that, especially when you're starting out. Yeah, I mean, Citadel, just their washes are a traditionally good product. Like Nuln Oil, Seraphim Sepia, and Agrax Earthshade are the sort of traditional holy trinity. And if you're just starting, you'll get a ton of mileage out of that stuff. So that would absolutely be my recommendation. Yes. They're just easy. If you want an alternate one, Army Painters, like Strong Tone. I'm trying to remember where the hell my Army Painter is. Oh, it's over there. Like Strong Tone, Mid Tone, Dark Tone, all that kind of stuff is also the Soft Tone, Strong Tone, Dark Tone. There you go. Is the other ones you can look at. And they're also good. Let's see. Riddlegart. Hey Vince, I was going to take one of your classes at Adepticon. Sad that happened. Yeah, it's a shame. Asking, do I have any plans to do some Sky or Discord classes? Not at the moment, but I mean, I'll be teaching at Nova. I'll be teaching at Gen Con. I'll be back to Adepticon next year. I do, I have videos on everything that I've done there, that I'm going to teach. I know it's not a replacement for in person, and I hope to see you there next year. I just don't know really how I'd facilitate that beyond what I already do with videos. So, but I mean, it is a shame. But I teach a lot of different conventions every year, and I hope to be back next year. So hopefully I'll see you there, sir. It's a shame. It really is. I mean, but it's the right choice. I'm not lamenting it. It was absolutely the correct choice. There's no reason to bring that many people into a situation where a disease like that could easily vector out pretty hard. But I will miss it. I mean, I've spent the last 9 months, 10 months preparing for Golden Demon in the U.S. Like I started my first project in May of last year. So, that's a shame. Like most of those projects are 100, 150 hours, and I'll still get to use them or compete with them at some point. So that's fine. It's just they were really Golden Demon projects. So I'm sad, but I am at the same time not going to lose any sleep over it. Like there will be more contests, there will be more things in the future, and we will all get together and celebrate, and there will be a new day. You can cue up the Sting music now. Okay. Steve Dooley, any advice for getting out of a bit of a rut? I find myself getting a bit quicker, but not any better. Yes, deliberate practice. The answer is you want to, it's good that you're working your speed muscle. There's nothing wrong with that. Your speed muscle is important. You want to make sure that you work that. But getting better is a matter of deliberate practice. You can do anything repeatedly and get no better at it. Deliberate practice is how you improve at things. So you say, on this mini, I am going to work on blending or non-metallic or making or texture or my highlights having enough contrast or whatever. And you do that and you fail at it, and then you learn what you failed from, and then you do it again, and then you get a little better, but you mostly still fail, and then you do it again, and you so on and so forth. I love how your follow-up is with regards to painting, not life, but the answer is much the same in either. If you really want to be good at something, then you need targeted, deliberate practice about it, right? And you need to fail a few times before you do it, before you get it. That's the answer. And that, by the way, is also very refreshing from being in the rut. When you do those things, it energizes you, it jazzes you up, and you'll find yourself like quite a bit more inspired, honestly. So, because you're pushing yourself like that. Let's see. Question: how to blend Vallejo metal color paints, especially silver? The answer is you put them on there. So here's how I do it. I either do traditional layering, that is to say, I just mix slowly. You know, I take steel and silver and I mix slowly, increasing increments of them. That's one. The easiest answer is honestly feathering. Like, feathering is your best bet, where you put a little bit of the silver on cleanly, you wipe your brush, and then you just feather out with your mostly dry brush. That's going to give you a really nice result, especially on the metal. They feather really well. The other answer is you can apply some wet steel at one end, some wet silver at the other end, and then wipe your brush and pull them together. And you do some traditional wet blending. So, I mean, same rules apply, basically. Mons, for someone that picked up an airbrush a few days ago, what would you recommend as a few exercises to learn the basics of the tool? Actually, just make sure you watch my videos on cleaning it. That would be my first recommendation. Then do like we talked about earlier and make sure your paint's thin enough. That's your next one, which I also have a video on. And then beyond that, just, I don't know, start picking up some minis and painting. I don't know that I really recommend any training exercises. Just getting into it's going to be the best teaching of it, right? Like, work on applying just some base colors to an area and then slowly try to push a highlight where you want it to be, right? Like, try to work on being, well targeted and controlled and understanding how your airbrush brush flow works, and being aware of, like, when you're spraying this, this thing, you're also spraying what's behind it as well. So kind of, be aware of how your angles work and stuff like that. Just play with learning your angles and your finger control. Much like brush control is an important thing you can only learn by painting, airbrush control, that is to say your trigger control, is something you only learn by doing. And it's the most important thing you've got, as you need to sort of learn to work it and treat your airbrush like a brush. My best advice is that, I guess, if I was to summarize, treat your airbrush like a brush. Think of it a lot like that, and you'll have success. Let's see. Anthony, have you found that the pigments in artists' quality acrylics aren't ground as fine as specialized miniature acrylics at all? It depends on the acrylics. They're certainly not meant for the type of small painting we're using. It's a very wide question. There's many different types of artist acrylics out there, and there's many different types of miniature acrylics out there, and all of them have different levels of pigmentation size, right? So the answer is sometimes that could certainly be yes, but it's not always going to be the case. So yeah, I guess it just depends on your exact comparison. Okay. Boy, I'm behind. All right, I got to catch up here. All right. Hurry up mode. Let's go. I'm going to start answering. I'm going to try to be a little less wordy. Okay. That's a good point. Zenithaling is a good place to start. Absolutely. Okay. Let's see. Galen's second question. What is your least favorite or just straight ugly color Vallejo released? I don't know. I probably don't own many of those that I don't like. I would have gotten rid of them. God, I don't know. I find, like, some of the blues to be kind of ugly. Like, they just look very fake. But yeah, I mean, all kind of fit. I don't know. I have a lot of Vallejo paints on my wall, and I was looking at them, and I kind of enjoy all of them for their appropriate time. Zplut, Howdy, Vince. What would be your method of choice for painting Sisters of Battle fast but with good results? I mean, I don't think about how to paint an individual figure, right? Like that's why I don't do hobby cheating of like today we're gonna paint a Sister of Battle, because that's not how I think of figures. Like a Sister of Battle is armor and cloth and skin tone. So like I would use my standard cheats on that. So like I have how to paint fast flesh tone and wet blending cloth and how to get a good look out of black, right? Like in my how to paint, assuming you're going to do a standard sister, so that's what I'm picturing in my head. So she has black armor. In my how to paint black armor video I recently did, I have a sort of speed method for that, right? So I don't think of minis as there's no whole mini, there's only its component parts. And so those are that's why I break up my videos like I do. And so, my recommendation would be I would use like any of the speed base coating techniques you've seen me do on wet blending for cloth. I would use the speed technique from the black armor, and I would use how to paint fast flesh tone, and then I would use the video I did on how to paint white hair. There you go. Okay. Let's see. Jarrett, been trying to get into oil painting. Tried to paint black cloaks on my night haunt, and it came out good, but literally took over a week to dry. Any way to speed it up? Sure, there are things that will make your oil paints dry faster. You can let them seep out on cardboard first, so some of the extra linseed oil comes out. There are things that will help. There are additives you can use to expedite drying time. You can try like the Obtilung 502 oils. They're formulated to dry a little bit faster. So all that kind of stuff, I would say, is probably my best tips. Rust Belt. Vince, I enjoyed the marble effect video for bases. I'm wanting to do it for inlays on the blasted Hollow Hearth building, Sigmar and his chair. Does anything change for them compared to flat bases? Break it up to one flat surface at a time when you're working, because it's a technique that requires very wet paint to work because it's like sissing and stuff. So you want to do like one flat surface at a time. You just break it down to every flat surface, and you do one to completion, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one, that kind of thing. Other than that, no. Ice Axe Miniatures. Quick question. What is your favorite paint bottle? I like Reaper. I find they clog a bit more, but their tips don't spit out as much as Vallejo or Scale 75. Honestly, Pro Acryls, who has their little screw tops. I just really like them. They don't ever clog. You have to wipey the little tip at the end, but I like them. I've never had to remove a clog from one of these ever. So, yeah, that would be my answer. The Pro Acryl tip. Let's see. Trippy the Shroom. I don't have a question. Just want to say thank you. Well, hey, I'm very happy to help, Trippy. Okay. Let's see. Brooks. Hey, Vince, do you apply the same techniques to your Warhammer model eyes that you do in your Chibi Eye video? No. I mean, when it comes to, like, regular Warhammer figures, especially on an army type level, no, I mean, I will generally just keep it pretty straightforward, like gray and then a gray-white in the center of the pupil, maybe a little bit of red around the edge, and then a black dot. Most Warhammer figures, most 28mm miniatures eyes are so small. It's like outside of, say, display painting or something, where you're really trying to work color in. And then sometimes I will kill myself there trying to put in, like, life dot or life lights and stuff like that. No, it's just more or less like, keep it simple and go from there. And thank you very much on the base. I appreciate that, Brent. Let's see. Joe Osborne, greetings from SoCal, new to the hobby and have an airbrush. What do you use for your thinner? Sure, great question. I'll show you exactly. So, I use Vallejo airbrush thinner and flow improver. I make a mix out of this in a smaller bottle, which looks like this and is all gummy and old. And the mix goes 80% thinner, 20% flow improver, roughly. It's not like some exact measurement. I'm not doing science over here. Close to that. So that's how I thin. And I have great results with that. Don't generally have clogs. Don't usually have a problem. Let's see. Amy, I really love the Scale 75 metallics, but they all come with these colored metallic alchemy paints. Do you have any idea how they're supposed to be used? I can't figure out what circumstance you're supposed to use. To add colors and reflections to the metal. So kind of exactly the thing we were talking about earlier with, you know, using OSL in metallics, but just adding cool sheens or effects or reflections. You know, metal, highly reflective metal reflects the colors in the ambient environment around it. So that's the idea. Just being able to add interesting colors and inflections into your metals. Nothing more than that. So you don't have to use them, certainly, but they can be good things to just kind of work in there. Okay. Yep, exactly what Brian L. said next. So, you know, adding shadows, adding extra reflections, the highlights, all those kind of things like that. Matthias, how would you create an underwater atmosphere consistently over different units and bases while painting an army? I would darken all the colors down. If you're really deep underwater, there's not a lot of light, so I would darken everything down, you know, work in a lot of navy blues and stuff like that. Work in deeper tones, and then have some bright pop colors. If you watch the video posted on, if you go to the Honest Wargamer, there was a video where I reviewed all the armies that were at CanCon. And in there, there's a Igneth Deepkin army that was sort of painted, and I thought achieved the effect really well. Because it uses very dark, desaturated colors, but then it like bright pink, sort of bioluminescent pop colors down there. And I really liked how that looked. It sold the effect, the environment, the feeling, right? So that would be the way I'd go about it. Okay. Keys. Hi, Vince. Do you have experience with airbrush stencils? Any tips from using them on somewhat irregular surface? Yeah, I use a bunch of different stencils. So I have these guys, I think, from Fallout Hobbies, like this kind of thing right here. And I'll use them sometimes. And my answer is I don't use them on irregular surfaces. They just don't really work. Just freehand it is the answer. On an irregular surface, like, it's going to be much less infuriating to you. On a flat surface, like the hull of a knight or something, or a shoulder pad, sure, they're great. But if it's an irregular surface at all, I honestly just freehand it. It's worth it. And it'll force you to get better at that sort of thing, right? Like, again, that deliberate practice thing. Like, you'll just be better off putting in the hours and practicing. Because in the end, like, a stencil's cool. And I don't get me wrong, like I said, I use them. But in the end, you working up that freehand muscle is going to be a much more versatile skill. Okay. Let's see. Yes, agreeing with that. So, like, alclad, just people talking about alclad metals. Yes, once you go outside of acrylic paints, your alclad 2 is one of the best metals around. I'm going to try the new extreme metals from AK, so I'm excited about those, see how those look and work. Those are also not acrylic-based paints. Recommended colors on Vallejo metal color line, or just pull the full, or just pull the trigger. No, you don't need the full line. Here we go. Everybody ready? Okay, one more time. I wonder if people already answered this question for me. This is the purchasing order. Here we go. Ready? Steel, silver, copper, gold, pale burnt metal. From there, season to taste. Exhaust metal, you know, whatever you like. So again, steel, silver, copper, gold, pale burnt metal, and then whatever. That's my advice. Very good. Stay safe, Emily. Okay, let's see. TD, Vince, how would you build paint a base to look like a mossy hill, like Japanese temples often have? Sure. So build it up with cork, put some clay, or like DOS clay, or milliput, or whatever your filler of choice is, over top of it into a nice little hill, and then lay down some various grasses. I mean, you know, building up a base is usually just a matter of you need a surface to sort of build it up. I have an old video called Building Up a Big Base. In that case, I used it to build a desert base, but you may want to go check that out. I would use exactly the same techniques today. You can use DAP, like wallpaper, or not wallpaper, sorry, drywall putty is another one you can use for filler. Sure, that works just fine. Any of that stuff. and then just, you know, lay down that, and over the top I would have some rocks and some differences. I wouldn't make it don't make it a one smooth surface. You want some, you know, variations in that. Hills are very unnatural, right? So something like that. Let's see. Scott Coley, hello. Do you thin your Vallejo airbrush primers before using them with an airbrush? Scott, I'm going to assume you joined late with that question, and that's okay. So I will repeat what I said earlier in the video, which is I thin everything. Full stop. That's it. And the answer is yes. I thin everything. Everything. But what about everything? Everything. Okay, so there you go. Now, next question might be ratio, probably 1 to 2 with Vallejo primers. So like 1 thinner to 2 drops of primer. Let's see. Kelly, Vince, what was that old truck with super glue and tissue? Oh, trick with super glue and tissue paper you once discussed. Yeah, sure. So for getting metal models to stick together, this is what we had to do back in the 90s. Sure, so here it is. You got 2 pieces of a metal model you need to stick together, and they're a relatively thin surface. You want to make sure they adhere. Okay, so here's how we did it back then. You take your 2 pieces of metal, you take a tissue. You want a single ply tissue. Like, you know, most of the time now, like the tissues that I use are like, you know, tissues with lotion and they're multiply and they don't fall apart. You want the cheapest possible facial tissue. Okay. So you want it like single ply. If you got a multiple one, just pull it apart. Make sure it doesn't have lotion in it, stuff like that. And you take the 2 pieces, you put super glue on each end. Okay, so there's both ends have super glue. And then you take a little tiny itty bitty baby square of that facial tissue and you put it up against the glue on one side, and then you take the other side and you push it against that. And what you're doing there is creating a bonding agent, right? So the glue is going to attach, because the glue can't really soak into metal, right? It's hard for it to find purchase there. But each side can attach to the paper towel because the fibers, or so the facial tissue, sorry, because the fibers and stuff and the glue soaks into it. So they both become attached to the facial tissue more than they become attached to each other. That's how we did it back in the day. I know this keeps coming up, but how would you make the same color as Retributor armor using Vallejo metal color? I would use 3 drops of gold to 1 drop of copper. If you don't like that, if it's not quite warm enough for you yet, then make it 5 to 2. Or something like that. Okay? That's all you need. You'll get a beautiful, lustrous, rich, warm gold. If you've seen all the gold I use on any miniature I've painted, that's basically the mixture that I'm using. Ryan, hey Vince, you're going to continue your color series? Yes, I will. I do them about every 10 or 12 videos. You will see one coming up relatively soon. Brentwood, question, have you ever played around with inks, medium, and paint to create a contrast like paint? No, I've never tried to really make my own contrast. Like, I have contrast paints, and I use them. I like them just fine. I use them for various purposes. I don't really feel that they're there, they exist. I would just use them. Like, I certainly mix flow aid into things to make them be, if I want things to get real thin, like I'll mix some water, some flow aid and stuff to get it so it's really flowing down into the recess as well. But I've never, like, I have no desire to try to manufacture my own contrast. Like, that product exists. I don't sew my own t-shirts. I don't grow my own food. Like, we've got people for that. Okay. Owen, what's the best way to repair chains or flimsy joints? Got a unit of Wrathmongers that can't be pin joined. I'm going to try using super glue and Army Painter rapid setting spray. Yeah, I mean, with little thin stuff like that, that's really kind of the best option. The other thing you can do is you can try, you know, a very small piece of, like, green stuff that you roll into a very thin snake, and you kind of wrap around it. Just make it look like a rope or something that's tied on there. Like, he has a little ribbon on the middle of his chain. It's an easy modeling thing. That'll give you some extra support. Like, GW is famous for just tying random ribbons around all sorts of things. So why not have a ribbon around the middle of your chain? That can be a way to add some extra support. But yes, I always use accelerant. Like, super glue, accelerant, job's a good one. You know, I can't imagine waiting for super glue to actually dry. I haven't waited for super glue to dry in years. Like I drop super glue, drop accelerant, 1, 2, 3, done. Hey Vince, how would you go about weathering bronze? Looking for inspiration for my Death Guard. Verdigris and black is sort of the short answer. I don't know that I've ever done a full video on weathering bronze specifically, but if you go back and look at a recent video I did on, you know, making non-metallic metal, or sorry, making true metallic metal look like in non-metallic metal styles revisited. I don't know when it was, probably in the 170s or something. You'll see how I'm using a bronze-ish color there. And so you'll see how I weather it there. But the answer is, you know, some verdigrising, some turquoise, some blue-green, and some black. Like, here's the shortest answer to this. Weathering is one of those things that's actually really fun to do because you have the hardest things to paint are things that have no real-world analogs. But there is a horde of real-world bronze that's been weathered. There's bronze sitting out all over the place. So just search for it. Just go Google image search weathered bronze and look at it. Don't look at passing. See it, right? Look at the dots, the shapes, the patina. How is it weathering? What are those colors? Break it down. And then put that on your mini is really the answer. By the way, great name, Suspicious Pineapple. I love that. That is truly hilarious. Okay. Wow, Trello Huntery. That's a lot of Trello. Okay, I'm just going to say wow. Why does everyone say to black rim your bases, but GW use the same color as the rest of the base or brown? The answer is because a black rim creates a bridging point between a frame between the figure and the stuff that's on top of it, which is in the universe of the figure, and the rest of the world, which is not. And GW is wrong and should stop doing brown bases because they are wrong. Soft brown like that that's the same color is incredibly distracting and extends the universe from the top of the miniature onto the side and bottom of the miniature, which is not correct. That is not part of the miniature, and it doesn't look good. Your bases can be any color as long as they're black. And by the way, by black, I mean any kind of near thing like that. They can be dark gray or, you know, anything like that. It's just they shouldn't be weird, wacky colors. They most definitely, under no circumstances, should be green. But I mean, like, how many paintings... Okay, I have frames behind me. Every one of those frames is black. Why is the frame black? The frame is black because I want to create a distinction between the wall and the painting, right? Or the picture, the poster, whatever it happens to be, right? That's the same reason. It's creating negative space that separates the figure from the and the universe it occupies from the rest of the world it does not. It creates a clean visual break line. There you go. I agree with Tristan. GW is wrong. Okay, Cameron Coates. Going to try painting my first bust, one of the smaller Banshee Anonymous ones. How would you make a painting handle for this thing? I have one, and I did make a painting handle for it. I drilled a pin up into the bottom and then put it down into a piece of cork. So, like, something like this. I put a little piece of cork on a base, and then that sits on top of something with it sticky. And then there you go. And I just drill up through it with a pin vise. You know, standard sort of pin vise up into the top. Put a pin up there. You're good to go. Then you're all set for when you want to run it down into your plinth, too. Let's see. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Still just reading, catching up. A lot of discussion about base rim colors. We're all going to bike shed the heck out of this. Okay. Brett, do you use MDF movement trays? How do you get the paint to stick to match the base of the models? Yes, I do use MDF movement trays, and I just spray them black. That's it. I don't worry about anything else. I don't want them to look like the base, the mini. The movement tray is not in universe. It's just a game aid there to help it. I don't try to make my 3-inch and 9-inch measuring sticks match my bases. I don't try to make my dice match my bases. They're all just game aids. They're there to make the minis be easier to transport. They're not there for display purposes. Okay. All right. Mark Nolan, hi Vince, hope you're doing well. Was wondering if a black, gray, and white Zenithal is a good choice for Blood Angels, or would a warm Zenithal be better? Even for Blood Angels with their red, well, I guess they're very bright reds. I'm sorry, I was thinking of like somebody else, like Crimson. No, who the heck was I thinking of? It doesn't matter. Yes, a warm Zenithal is definitely the right answer for Blood Angels. There you go. Before I twist myself around this axle. 5, Feeve. Vince, I'm currently trying to do Marsh bases for my Skaven Force. Cool. I like that idea. Any advice on ways to do this over a whole army? Sure. You can do lots of different things. Like, obviously, a little bit of, so I assume you want it to be kind of wet. Lots of tall grasses and reeds and stuff like that. Get yourself some of this, like some AK Interactive puddles. This is kind of mixed to be murky, muddy water. You can just add a couple drops of this to the base so it looks wet and glossy at the bottom. And then, yeah, lots of rocks, weird sticks sticking up out of the marsh. Little tiny animals hidden in there. Skulls that are obviously half submerged. All sorts of fun stuff. Marshes are great. That's a great biome for a base. I love that idea. That sounds wonderful. Reminds me of the end times when the Skaven were marching on the Lizardmen homeland and absolutely wrecking it and decimating it. So there you go. As well should happen to all Slann. Okay. Trippy the Shroom. I heard you mention it earlier, but what are your thoughts on the Army Painter Strong Tone? I used it as a final top to bottom wash. But I hear mixed thoughts on it. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's very strong. Ultimately, I would not recommend it as a final. Well, I never recommend washes as a final step ever, because that is not going to ultimately look great. Like you will get coffee staining and that kind of stuff on there. So, yeah, I mean but that being said, I have no problem with strong tone as its purpose. I think it's good. I think all the Army Painter, like their soft tone, strong tone, and dark tone are all good. They're good analogs for the GW product and effective. Travis Ellis, I'll assume I answered your question earlier. This is about the thinner flow improver with primers. Toku, why do base coat and mid-tone color? Wouldn't it be easier to shadow color as a base and work up, or does it matter? No, it doesn't matter. Because in general, that's personal style. So somebody like Sergio Calvo starts with the darkest color and then layers up completely to his highest color. He's one of the best artists in the world. Many great artists start in the middle and then shade down because they like to set the midtone of what they want it to be and then understand their contrast from there as they continue to push it apart. The answer is there is no one right way. It's fine either way. It's a question of what you find easier and more logical and, can sort of conceptualize better. There's a lot of when you start a mini, you have to see what the end colors are, the end color state. One of the things you learn over time is just being able to visualize what a miniature is going to look like when it's done, and that helps guide you on how high your contrast should go. So, yeah, it's really just a question of that. Fading, starting to work on my first army. What are your thoughts on how consistent the zenithal angle should be from model to model? Would it just look strange having the light coming from different facings? Yeah, I mean, in general, like I said, I go for like a 130-ish. So near, not directly above, but more like this. And in general, it's fine. You don't notice the difference once everything's sort of painted. If you watched the speed painting an army in a week video I did with the Empire guys, that was done with the glazes and that was certainly done with like glazes and zenithal. And I literally just laid them all out at once. Like I primed the whole army at once. That way I knew they were all at the same angle. So, but if you're not doing the whole army at once, the answer is just, be roughly consistent and you'll be fine. If it's slight off, people get way too concerned about having things look the same in armies. It doesn't matter. People don't notice. Okay? Even judges don't notice when you have these slight inconsistencies, and they're not going to mark you down for that. Like, there's 100 of the things I care about more as a paint judge than little things like that. Right? So, if I was going to give advice in general on army painting being better for the armies I judge, let me tell you, consistent angles of lighting would be way down the list. Way down the list. Just getting all your gaps and mold lines cleaned and pushing your contrast, we can just start there. And if we get to that point, then we can do the rest. It's like if you have a main artery cut but you also have a hangnail. Which one am I going to medically address first, you know? Okay. Anthony, thanks for your answers. Glad you liked the vid idea. Oh, cool. All right, good. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Simarka, can you think of a way to represent speed? To represent speed when painting, modeling a Slanesh army without repositioning models? Just through paint? No. Because, like, speed lines in comics happen off of the miniature, right? They're things you put behind people. Posing and now with posing and composition, sure. Like, people look faster when their legs are spread apart, when their arms are spread apart, when they're more at a forward angle. Like, all of those things communicate to us running and motion. Bringing them to the front of the base is also a compositional element that makes them feel fast. People who stand way back are perceived to be not in a hurry. Things at the front of the base are perceived to be fast and pushing forward hard, right? So just with paint alone, no, honestly, not really. But with compositionally, yeah, you can do a lot of stuff. Let's see. What do I think about Vallejo shifters? Any plan on using them? I have some. I'll play with them at some point. I don't particularly love color shifting stuff in general. I would rather just do that by hand because it's hard to work with them and highlight them and shade them in the way I normally treat metals, because I treat metals like non-metallic, and once you start applying a bunch of other things on top, they lose their effect. So, but I'll play with them at some point. Do you ever find yourself getting bummed out by how good some painters are? No, but I understand I don't, but I understand the instinct. Like, when I look at something Land does, or Kirill Kanayev, or Sang-Yeon Lee, or Sergio, or somebody like that, that really it does, top level work. And there's the list of painters like that are long. I often think, wow, that's really amazing. I want to be able to achieve that. It drives me. But at the same time, sometimes that happens with my own work. Like, I'll look at something past, I did, and I'll be like, how did I do that? Like, it just happens. You just get into the rhythm of it. So, I mean, my answer is, there's no reason to expect to be bummed out. Unless you've also painted for 20 years of deliberate practice and put in the probably 20 to 30,000 hours they have. Like, if that's the case, then sure, I guess be bummed because you didn't use your time as wisely. But, if you're not that, if you haven't done that amount of work, I write some stories and stuff. I don't fault myself for not being as good of a GM when I GM D&D as Chris Perkins or somebody like that, right? Who does it professionally. I like to go running sometimes. I don't get angry because there are runners who can run marathons. I just haven't put in the time or the practice, right? So, yeah, I mean, the answer is just it's perspective, I try not to get bummed by much stuff. There's too much good stuff in life. Let's see. Hi, Vince. I was wondering, what is the smallest airbrush needle you would use for a glaze or tint? 0.2 is generally the smallest needle I use. They make a 0.15 for the Infinity. But I don't own that one. My Infinity has a larger needle in it. And I don't use this brush very much, I will state. This thing is a masterpiece, but I use it for very particular jobs, and I want to be very careful. But yeah, I would say 0.2 is usually the smallest I use normally. Let's see. Okay, yeah, good. Just some person had some. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Yes, using something like recommending additives and great for making oil paintings dry faster. Thank you, Anthony. Great recommendations there all around. John Gallant, do you mind if I share the link to the collated hobby cheating list for those that might not be in the PMP group? John, I don't mind at all. I would love to do that. You're a hero and an amazing person for doing that. So share alike. One final note. Anybody who does play Age of Sigmar, if you are, I'll put the link to the 3 surveys that I talked about on Wednesday that I'm putting out there for how people like the armies. down in the description of this, so go check that out and fill those out. They take about a minute each. There's 3 surveys. I'd love to have you do it after the video. They'll be down in the description, so go click those. I'm going to close those down probably tomorrow so I can start doing some synthesis on the data. Oh, nice. Okay. Good tip, Anthony. Anthony Burtonshaw. Hey, Vince, been rewatching your old Army on Parade vids. Was wondering if you plan on doing any more. Yeah, I really need to. Like, it's just, I keep painting stuff and saying, like, I'm going to make that video. I'm going to make that video. And I just keep not doing it. And I keep adding to those armies. Like the Iron Jaws video, I've only added 1 or 2. I've only added 1 or 2 units to since I did that. So I do need to do one for Slaanesh. I'll need to do one for this Tempest Eye army. It'd be fun to do one for, like, the Ogre army that I speed painted. I probably need to do one for my beasts. I realize I've never done one for my Beasts of Chaos. So, yes, I absolutely want to do more. Let's see. Okay. Okay, more questions. Are you going to talk about the puppy model you have picture in the top right? I just have it up there to have something interesting on. I'm going to share it later on. It was a lot of fun to paint. I loved the llama kitty. I loved this thing. This is one of the best minis I've painted in a long time. It's the perfect level of detail. There's only one thing I would have changed had I noticed it right off the gate. I would have gotten rid of the fur. That's like these random little fur things on his leg and here on the edge of his like torso muscles. That's the only mistake they made. I do not understand why they put those there. There's some of the fur edges that I like at the sort of crest of the tum-tum and stuff. But I just... It's weird. It's a weird fur texture in some places. So there you go. Big Abe 12. Hey, Vince, I'm trying to shade my ultramarines. Highlighted them with an airbrush and just using Nuln Oil or black looks strange. Would you recommend a dark blue contrast paints or inks or something else? So you don't want to wash the whole thing is the answer. Like, that's what's not going to look good. In general, you could do a couple things. You could mix in a dark red into your blue. That'll give you quite a whole red. That'll give you quite a dark color. You can use my painting partner's back. She gets down and gets up every so often. Hey. Lay down. Okay. But the real answer is I don't generally wash anything like that because those Space Marines actually take to washes quite poorly, especially late in the process. You could use one of the darker contrast paints, but I would still only apply it into the areas you're specifically trying to shadow. And then I would just feather them out into the other areas. If you over highlighted and now you want to cover that over, then I would recommend just like a nice glaze of your midtone over the top. Trying to put your shadow color up over the top of your highlight is just going to be disruptive. Like, it's not going to work. There's none of the darkest color in the lightest color, right? That is to say, there's no black up in the white, is what I mean there. I hope that helps. Richard, I'm getting speckling when zenithal priming with a rattle can. Any advice of combating that without just getting closer to the mini? I mean, it's just part of really, honestly, what's with a rattle can. I mean, my best advice, you're not going to love, Richard, but it's get an airbrush and all that goes away instantly, and you can prime anytime and easily, and you don't get that happening. But the best answer is yes, you've, pushed down on the trigger less and closer to the mini. But, I mean, airbrushes are always going to, rattle cans are always going to speckle some. That the paint is not aerosoled to such a level as to not do that. Anthony M. Vince looking at doing a 40k Night Lords Midnight Blue armor under moonlight. How would I differentiate that cool ambient lighting from just the standard highlighting of the blue? You really wouldn't, is the answer. Like, it's not going to be readable. Dark, like, figures at night is almost always a challenging thing to paint. It's not really an army thing. Like I said, you can desaturate all the colors like I talked about before, and that'll make it feel like that. But when it's already Night Lords, when it's already that super dark blue, I mean, the answer is use white, blue highlights and warm shadows. Okay, because at night shadows will be warmer and light will be cool. Highlight will be colder. So you can certainly push that, and that'll help with the feeling. But I mean, nobody's gonna just look at your force probably ever in a normally lit room full of light and everything around and go, "Oh, those figures are at night." Those kinds of effects are just, if you're really trying to sell that, It's better on something like a display model where you can put it against a black background like this guy here, and you can, you can control the overall lighting source. But my best advice is use a cool highlight and a warm shadow. Let's see. Thanks for the answer on modeling speed. Are there other basing tricks that would sell the speed effect? Oh, sure. You could have rocks being kicked up. Think of everything you ever see in, like, when The Flash or Superman or, Quicksilver or something take off at high speed. So you have, like, little things flying from the back of their feet. You can, like, dig their feet down into the dirt where they've really pushed, and, like, rocks have kicked up behind. You can put a couple, like, little floating rocks, stuff like that. It's a good way to go. John, I don't think it's going to let you post it, but if you post the link down in the comments, that'll work, and I'll pin it to the top. Okay. All right. Hey, we got to the bottom of the list. How about that? Okay. I sped up enough. There we go. All right. So, okay. So, Agamemnon, I want you to go. He said, I envy people you have no problems with an airbrush. Mine clogs constantly to the point where I spend hours cleaning it after every session. Go watch my How to Clean Your Airbrush Fast video. If you're having problems with your airbrush, there is no reason your airbrush should clog. If it's happening, it's one of two things. Either you're not thinning your paints enough or you're cleaning your airbrush in the wrong way. Okay, and I talk about both in there. So 1, thin your paints more. 2, go clean your airbrush how I talk about in that video. You will not get clogs. There's nothing mystical about their airbrushes compared to yours. It's just how you're using the tool. And if you go watch that video, I walk you through exactly how to get it clean, and that should eliminate that problem. It's a wonderful tool, but it does require a different set of uses, so I hope that helps. Okay? All right. So we're at a little over we're almost at an hour and a half. So we went a little longer than an hour, but we always do. That's what's fun. Hopefully people are still there and can still hear me. Nobody asked any questions or typed anything recently, so hopefully you're all still there. All right. So in which case, let me make sure here. Yep. Hey, yay, people are still there. Okay. So at any rate, here's what I'll say as we bring it to a close. Hey, everybody. You're all here. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yes, the comment section only shows up once the live feed is over, so just drop it down there. Everybody hit that like button. I really like doing these, and I want to make sure as many people as possible find this and come here, and I can help them out. Like, my passion in this hobby is helping people overcome their challenges. When people hit like and do stuff like that and share these videos, it makes YouTube move this stuff up, and it makes people find these videos more. I do this once a month, so I'm always happy to do it. It's always going to be on a Saturday. It's always going to be between like noon and 3 p.m. It will usually be in the middle of the month, so whatever Saturday falls in the middle-ish of the month based on my availability. If you have any final questions, I'm happy to do a little lightning round. If people want to drop a few final last questions, go ahead and drop them. I do very much appreciate that. These were fantastic questions today, folks. I certainly hope that this has been helpful. So I'll let a few final questions roll in, and then we'll call it a day. Zen for one, Mints, for models on elevated stands like Seraphims, did you ever think to include the clear stand as part of the Mini, for example, as part of the Jet Blast or stirred up dirt ground? Yes, 100%. That's a great thing you can do. Like, I like to stick them off terrain, like have their foot touching terrain. I never use flight stands. But that being said, if you have jet exhaust or something like that, yeah, you can absolutely just do some modeling around that and hide it as jet exhaust. I think that's a perfectly valid idea. I've seen some people do that with what are they, Rocket Boys or Jump Boys or whatever the orcs are, and I think that's useful. Samarka, Vince, how do you model rocks that have been kicked up behind a model? Sure, great question. The answer is you stack them like this. So you put one on the back of his foot, just barely touching, and you glue that touch. Then you put another one just touching the corner of that. And then you put another one just touching the corner of that. And people will notice the rocks. They won't really notice the tiny connection of the foot. You can do the same thing from the ground. You have one kind of standing up, and then you have one just barely attaching to a corner there, and then one just barely attaching to a corner there, and so on. Massive Voodoo has an article about this. If you haven't already checked out Massive Voodoo, that's Roman the Pots thing. I highly recommend you go check that out. Thank you, Tristan, Storm Boys. I highly recommend you go check that out. They have an article on doing like magic lifting effects, and it's just, you kind of glue them all over the place like that. So there you go. Awesome. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, so we'll do Travis's question as the last question, and then we'll call it a day. Travis, wet palette. Would you say more water is always best? I feel like my paint gets too thin. Perhaps this goes back to your comment earlier about always be wicking. Always be wicking. You do have to watch how much water you have in there. It depends. The answer is it depends on your environment, how dry it is, how quickly your paint's drying on top. In general, you want a nice amount of water around the edge of the sponge. And you don't want to, one good trick with your wet palette, don't close it completely. It should not be sealed. I know that's weird to say. We make these things out of Ziploc and stuff because we feel like we want to seal it. But if you seal it completely, it will often get too humid, and the paints we use will often get over liquidated. If we were using like artist acrylics or heavy stuff like this on a relatively thick piece of paper, you'd want it sealed completely. With our stuff, you want a little bit of a crack so that there's some air interchange still, and that will somewhat help. So there you go. Any recommendations for Blood Angels? Red color for glazing over the warm zenith. Vallejo game color red ink would be an awesome one. So that's probably a good one. I love that. It's a nice, super bright shock punch in the face red that seems like it would fit. What's the name of the support staff behind you? This is Lyra. I have Penny and Aspen are my other two dogs, but this is Lyra. This is my dog. And she is my little baby girl, and she has an attitude about everything. She's very stubborn, and she's a wonderful little puppy. Okay. Idea for doing ash covered bases, dry pigments do the right thing to pull this off. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, dry pigment absolutely looks like ash, 100%. Any experience with the different color shifting paints out there? No, not really. I mean, I've used a few of them. Like I said, I don't love them. I'll probably do a larger talk about them at some point in time. Marco, hey Vince, I just got the Vallejo varnish. How's the ratio varnish to thinner? I use 2 or 3 drops of thinner in my, let's call it 6 to 8 drops of varnish. How about that? And those are fine. I also highly recommend AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish if you really want to go for matte. So, there you go, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Like I said, don't forget to hit like before you leave. I really appreciate that. But thank you so much today, folks, for all the fantastic questions. It is very much appreciated. I hope this was helpful. We'll be back next month to do it again. Obviously, if you haven't already subbed up, please do that. We'll have new hobby cheating videos here as usual every Saturday. Sorry again that I won't be teaching anybody to Adepticon, but don't worry. Still gonna be making lots of videos. Hey, when you're in your house, nothing else to do, right? So we all have a wonderful community here of miniature painters. This is the time when we've been preparing for to all shine, to reach out to each other, to keep positive, to stay happy, to get some things painted, to share our hopes, our dreams, our achievements, and everything else with each other. So let's keep that rolling, everybody. And thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody is safe. And don't forget to wash your hands. And everybody have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, everybody. See you later.